Tessa's wedding day turned into her worst nightmare, abandoned just 30 minutes before the ceremony. But what if the darkest moment could lead to an unexpected hero? Tessa's story will leave you speechless. Her fiancé rejected her because she couldn't walk, leaving her in a church garden, heartbroken, humiliated, broken. But then, a stranger appeared, a single father who did something so powerful, it rewrote their destinies. What happened next will restore your faith and love. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The sound hit Malcolm first, deep, gasping sobs tearing through the spring air like a wound opening. He froze mid-step, his hand on his daughter's shoulder, just outside the side entrance of Riverside Community Church in Burlington, Vermont. It was the kind of crying that made your chest tighten, the kind that spoke of something shattered beyond repair. "Daddy, what's that sound?" 6-year-old Autumn whispered, her eyes wide. Malcolm hesitated. They were here for a birthday party. His daughter's classmate was celebrating in the community hall at 2 o'clock. It was May 14th, 2023, a beautiful Saturday morning, and they'd arrived early to help set up. This wasn't their business. Whatever was happening around that corner in the church's side garden had nothing to do with them. But the crying continued, raw, desperate, the sound of someone whose world had just collapsed. "Stay right here, sweetheart," Malcolm said quietly, positioning Autumn by the door. "Don't move. I'll be right back." He walked around the corner and stopped dead. A woman sat in a wheelchair in the church garden, surrounded by fallen white rose petals. She was wearing a wedding dress, an elaborate gown with delicate lace sleeves and a train that pulled around her wheelchair like melting snow. Her blonde hair was styled in an intricate updo, small white flowers woven through it. Her makeup, clearly applied with painstaking care, was now streaked down her face. She was completely alone on what was obviously supposed to be her wedding day. The woman's hands trembled as they gripped the arms of her wheelchair. Her shoulders shook with each sob. She hadn't noticed Malcolm yet, lost in her own devastation. He stood frozen, uncertain whether to approach or retreat, whether his presence would be an intrusion or a kindness. The decision was made for him when she looked up. Her hazel eyes met his, and for a moment they just stared at each other. She looked startled, then embarrassed, then resigned, as if she'd already lost so much dignity today that one more witness to her pain hardly mattered. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice hoarse and broken. "I didn't think anyone would see me out here." Malcolm took a cautious step forward. "Are you okay?" The moment the words left his mouth, he wanted to take them back. She was clearly not okay. Nothing about this scene suggested okay. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped her throat. "Am I okay?" She gestured at herself. The dress, the wheelchair, the tears, the garden that should have been filled with wedding guests but was empty except for the two of them. "Today was supposed to be my wedding day. I'm in my dress. The guests are arriving. And my fiancé just told me 30 minutes ago that he can't marry me." The words landed like a physical blow. "He can't do it," she continued, her voice wavering between rage and heartbreak. "He looked me in the eyes this morning and told me he can't marry me. Not because he doesn't love me, not because we're not compatible, but because of this." She slapped the arm of her wheelchair, the sound sharp in the quiet garden. "Because I can't walk." Malcolm felt his stomach drop. "What? He can't marry someone in a wheelchair?" he said, each word deliberate and cutting. "He said he tried. He said he really tried to be okay with it. But looking at me in this dress, knowing I'd never walk down the aisle the way we'd planned, knowing our future would be complicated, he couldn't do it. So he left. Just walked out of the church. Left me here in this dress in front of 200 people." The silence that followed was suffocating. Malcolm stood there, a complete stranger in a church garden, watching a woman's world disintegrate in real time. He'd experienced pain in his life, the kind that carved deep grooves into your soul. But this, being rejected on your wedding day, in your wedding dress, for something completely beyond your control, this was a cruelty he couldn't fathom. 8 months ago, the woman said suddenly, her voice quieter now, almost detached, I was working at a veterinary clinic. I loved my job. I loved the animals. I was good at what I did. She stared at her hands, at the engagement ring still on her finger. There was an accident. A storage rack collapsed on me. The weight, it crushed my spine. The surgery saved my life, but… She trailed off, her jaw tightening. I'm paralyzed from the waist down. I'll never walk again. Malcolm's heart cracked a little wider. Tyler, my fiancé, he said he'd stay. He visited me in the hospital. He held my hand during rehab. He said it didn't matter, that we'd get through this together. We postponed the wedding for 6 months so I could focus on recovery. He seemed supportive. He said all the right things. And I believed him. I thought he meant it. But he didn't. No. The word came out like a sigh, like the last bit of air leaving a deflating balloon. 3 weeks ago, I started noticing changes. Small things. He stopped holding my hand. He'd flinch when he had to help me with the wheelchair. When he looked at me, there was this doubt in his eyes, but I told myself I was imagining it. I wanted so badly to believe he loved me enough. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. This morning, I was in the bridal room with my sister Naomi, getting ready. I was nervous but excited. And then Tyler walked in. He wasn't supposed to see me before the ceremony. Bad luck, you know. A bitter laugh. He said he needed to talk. And he told me he couldn't do it. That he'd been trying to convince himself for months that he could handle this, but he couldn't. That he wanted a normal life with a normal wife. The last words came out strangled, and fresh tears spilled down her face. He said he was sorry. As if sorry could fix this, as if sorry could undo the fact that he's been lying to me for months. That he let me plan this whole wedding, let me believe in us, let me sit here today thinking I was about to marry the love of my life, when all along he was just trying to find the courage to abandon me. Malcolm felt anger rising in his chest, not at this woman, but at the man who'd done this to her, at the cowardice it took to wait until the wedding day itself to break someone's heart, at the cruelty of letting her hope right up until the last possible moment. But anger wouldn't help her now. I'm so sorry, Malcolm said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. The woman looked at him, really looked at him, as if trying to understand why this stranger was still standing here, listening to her pain. The worst part, she said, her voice cracking. Everyone will understand. They'll say Tyler was brave for trying. They'll say it's understandable that he couldn't handle being married to someone disabled. They'll pity me. Poor, paralyzed Tessa, rejected at the altar. For the rest of my life, this will be my story, the bride who was left because she couldn't walk. Tessa. So that was her name. That won't be your story, Malcolm heard himself say. She looked at him skeptically. How do you know? Because you get to decide what your story is, he said firmly. Not him, not the people inside that church. You. What happened today doesn't define you. It defines him. It shows who he is, and it's not pretty. But it doesn't say anything about your worth. Tessa's eyes filled with fresh tears, but something in her expression shifted slightly. That's easy to say when you're not the one sitting in the wheelchair. You're right, Malcolm acknowledged. I can't know what you're feeling right now, but I do know what it's like to be abandoned by someone who promised to stay. The words hung in the air between them. Tessa studied his face, and Malcolm could see her mind working, trying to piece together what he meant. I'm a single father. My daughter, the little girl I told to wait by the door, her name is Autumn. She's 6 years old, and she has epilepsy. Understanding flickered across Tessa's face. Her mother left us when Autumn was 2. Malcolm continued, the old wound still tender even after 4 years. She said she wasn't ready for the responsibility. Said she couldn't handle the seizures, the hospital visits, the constant worry. She wanted a different life, so she walked away. Just like that. Left both of us. I'm sorry, Tessa whispered. Malcolm shook his head. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I understand what it feels like when someone you love decides you're not worth the difficulty, when they choose convenience over commitment. And I'm telling you that it says everything about them and nothing about you. Tessa's hands had stopped trembling. She was listening now, really listening. For a long time after my wife left, I thought maybe she was right, Malcolm admitted. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe Autumn and I were too much work. Maybe we didn't deserve someone who would stay. But then I realized something. What? Tessa asked softly. Love, real love, isn't about finding someone when life is easy. It's about choosing to stay when life gets hard. It's about looking at someone's challenges and saying, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Your fiancé failed that test, but that doesn't mean you're not worthy of someone who will pass it. The garden fell quiet, except for the distant sound of birds and the rustle of leaves in the spring breeze. Tessa looked down at her engagement ring, then slowly, deliberately, pulled it off her finger and set it in her lap. Tyler told me this morning that he wanted a normal wife, someone who could walk beside him, someone whose life wouldn't require accommodations or adjustments, someone easier. Then he wanted the wrong things, Malcolm said simply. Before Tessa could respond, they heard small footsteps, and both turned to see Autumn peeking around the corner. She'd clearly ignored her father's instruction to stay put. Daddy, you've been gone a long time. Then her eyes landed on Tessa. They went wide. Wow, you look like a princess. Despite everything, despite the tears, the heartbreak, and the ruined wedding, Tessa laughed. It was small and watery, but it was real. Thank you, sweetie, Tessa said. I'm Tessa. I'm Autumn. The little girl walked closer, completely unfazed by the wheelchair, the tears, or the dramatic scene she'd stumbled into. Why are you sad? Princesses aren't supposed to be sad. Sometimes even princesses have bad days, Tessa said gently. Autumn considered this seriously, then nodded. My daddy always says bad days don't last forever, and that the sun always comes back, even after the rain. Malcolm felt his heart swell with pride at his daughter's kindness. That's very wise, Tessa said. Can I sit with you? Autumn asked. You look like you could use a friend. And without waiting for permission, Autumn plopped down on the grass beside Tessa's wheelchair, reached out, and gently touched one of the white flowers in Tessa's hair. These are so pretty, Autumn said. Did someone special put them there? My sister did, Tessa said softly. This morning before. She didn't finish the sentence, but Autumn seemed to understand that something sad had happened. Well, I think you look beautiful, Autumn declared with the absolute certainty that only a 6-year-old could muster. And I think whoever made you sad was wrong. Tessa's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, they weren't entirely sad. She looked at this little girl who'd appeared out of nowhere, offering uncomplicated kindness with no expectations attached, and something inside her chest loosened just slightly. Malcolm watched his daughter and this heartbroken stranger, and he made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone else. He sat down in the grass, right there in his jeans, beside Autumn, making their small circle complete. Tessa stared at him in surprise. You don't have to. I know, Malcolm said, but I'm going to anyway. And so they sat there, the three of them, in that church garden on what should have been Tessa's wedding day. The sun filtered through the trees overhead. Rose petals scattered around them like fallen snow. And for the first time since Tyler had walked out, Tessa didn't feel completely alone. What's your favorite animal? Autumn asked suddenly, her voice bright and curious. Tessa blinked, caught off guard by the question. I work with animals, actually, or I did before the accident. I'm a veterinary assistant. Really? Autumn's face lit up. Do you like dogs? We have a dog at home named Biscuit. Autumn continued. He's old and he sleeps a lot, but he's really nice. I love dogs, Tessa said. And for the first time that morning, her smile reached her eyes. Maybe you could meet Biscuit sometime, Autumn said matter-of-factly. He makes people feel better when they're sad. Daddy says that's his superpower. Malcolm met Tessa's eyes over Autumn's head, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection, a possibility neither of them had expected. Footsteps approached from the church, and Tessa's sister appeared again. Naomi looked exhausted, her face pale and drawn. When she saw Tessa sitting with Malcolm and Autumn, confusion flickered across her features. "Liv, Tessa," Naomi corrected herself. "We really need to figure out what to do. Mom and Dad are inside with the wedding coordinator. Most of the guests have left, but there's still some people asking questions, and—" She stopped, noticing for the first time that Tessa wasn't crying anymore. "Are you okay?" Naomi asked carefully. "No," Tessa said honestly. "But I will be. Give me just a few more minutes." Naomi glanced at Malcolm and Autumn, clearly trying to piece together what was happening. Malcolm stood up and offered her a nod of reassurance, a silent message that her sister was safe, that they weren't here to cause harm or gawk at tragedy. Naomi seemed to understand. "A few more minutes," she agreed softly. "Then we need to get you out of that dress and go home." After Naomi disappeared back into the church, Autumn turned to Tessa with sudden determination. "You know what?" the little girl announced. "I think we should have a party right here. A happy party to make up for the sad one." "Autumn," Malcolm started, but Tessa interrupted. "Actually, that sounds perfect." Autumn beamed and immediately started gathering rose petals from the ground, arranging them in a small pile. "These can be decorations. And Daddy, you have your phone, right? Can we play music?" Malcolm pulled out his phone, scrolling through his playlist. "What kind of music do princesses like?" Tessa's laugh was genuine this time. "I haven't been asked that question in a very long time." "Then it's about time someone asked," Malcolm said, and he pressed play. Soft acoustic music drifted from his phone speaker, nothing grand or dramatic, just gentle guitar and a warm voice singing about new beginnings. Autumn handed Tessa a small bouquet of rose petals she'd arranged. "Every princess needs flowers," she said seriously. Tessa accepted them, holding the delicate petals in her palm, and something shifted inside her. This wasn't the wedding she'd planned. This wasn't the celebration she'd imagined. But in this strange, unexpected moment, sitting in a garden with a kind stranger and his daughter, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt seen, not as the woman in the wheelchair, not as the rejected bride, not as someone to pity or fix or carefully avoid, just as Tessa. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at Malcolm. "You didn't have to stop. You didn't have to stay. You didn't have to do any of this." "Yes, I did," Malcolm said quietly. "Sometimes the most important thing we can do is just show up. Even when it's not our place, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then." Tessa studied his face, the sincerity in his eyes, the gentle way he spoke, the ease with which he'd sat down in the grass beside a crying stranger. This man, whoever he was, understood something fundamental about kindness that Tyler had never grasped, that it wasn't about grand gestures or perfect words. It was about presence, about staying, about sitting in the mess with someone and not running away. "I don't even know your name," Tessa said suddenly, realizing they'd been sitting here for 20 minutes and she'd never asked. "Malcolm," he said. "Malcolm Foster." "Well, Malcolm Foster, you might have just saved my life today." "I didn't save anything," Malcolm said gently. "I just reminded you of what you already know, that you're stronger than this moment, and that what happened today doesn't get to write the rest of your story." They sat together a while longer, the three of them, as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Autumn chattered about school and Biscuit the dog and her favorite books. Tessa found herself actually listening, actually engaging, actually feeling something other than crushing despair. When it was finally time to go, when Tessa's parents emerged from the church, looking weary and worried, Malcolm stood up and brushed grass from his jeans. "I should let you go, but before I do, can I give you something?" Tessa nodded. Malcolm pulled a small notepad from his pocket, scribbled something down, and handed her the paper. It was his phone number. "I'm not trying to be weird or inappropriate, and there's no pressure, but if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who understands what it's like to be abandoned by someone who should have stayed, I'm here, even if it's just to listen." Tessa took the paper, her fingers trembling slightly. Why are you being so kind to me? You don't know me. Maybe that's exactly why, Malcolm said. Because sometimes strangers can offer something that people who know us can't: distance, objectivity, and the freedom to be honest without worrying about what they'll think of you tomorrow. He knelt down beside her wheelchair, meeting her at eye level, quite literally. Tessa, I don't know what your life looks like from here. I don't know how long it'll take to heal from this, but I know you're going to be okay. I don't know how I know, but I do. And when you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or next month or next year, I hope you'll reach out, because I think you're someone worth knowing. Tears streamed down Tessa's face, but they weren't the same tears as before. These were different, softer, mixed with something that felt almost like hope. Thank you, she whispered. Autumn threw her arms around Tessa's shoulders in an impulsive hug, nearly knocking the flower bouquet of petals from her lap. Bye, Princess Tessa. I hope you feel better soon. Tessa hugged her back, this precious little girl who'd shown up and simply loved without conditions or hesitations. Bye, Autumn. Thank you for my party. As Malcolm and Autumn walked away hand in hand, Tessa sat there with the piece of paper in her hand. She looked down at it, at the phone number, at the name written above it in neat handwriting, Malcolm Foster. She didn't know if she'd call. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again. She didn't know anything except that, for the first time since Tyler had walked out, she didn't feel completely broken. Her father approached, his face etched with concern and barely suppressed rage at Tyler. Sweetheart, let's get you home. Tessa nodded, folding the paper carefully and tucking it into the bodice of her wedding dress, right over her heart. As her father wheeled her toward the parking lot, she glanced back at the garden one more time, at the scattered rose petals, at the place where a stranger and his daughter had sat with her and refused to let her be alone. And she thought, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's just the beginning of something I didn't see coming. That evening, as Tessa sat in her apartment, finally out of the wedding dress, wearing comfortable clothes, her hair unpinned and loose around her shoulders, her phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting another message from Naomi or her mother checking on her. Instead, it was an unknown number. Hi, Tessa. It's Malcolm. I just wanted to make sure you got home okay. No need to respond if you're not up for it, just wanted you to know someone is thinking of you. Tessa stared at the message for a long moment. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to throw the phone across the room and crawl into bed and never come out. But something stopped her, the memory of Malcolm sitting in the grass, the sincerity in his eyes, the way he'd spoken to her, not with pity, but with respect, the way Autumn had called her a princess and meant it. Her fingers moved almost of their own accord. I'm home. Thank you for today. For stopping. For staying. It meant more than you know. She hit send before she could change her mind. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed again. I'm glad. And I meant what I said. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. No expectations. Just a friend who gets it. A friend. When was the last time someone had offered her that without wanting something in return? I might take you up on that. She typed. Fair warning, I'm kind of a mess right now. Aren't we all? Came the reply. Get some rest, Tessa. Tomorrow is a new day. She set her phone down and leaned back against the couch, exhausted, but no longer drowning. The apartment was quiet. The wedding that should have happened was over. And yet, somehow, impossibly, she felt the tiniest flicker of something in her chest. Not happiness, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, hope. The days that followed were brutal. Tessa had to return wedding gifts, field calls from concerned relatives who'd heard what happened, deal with the pitying looks from neighbors who'd seen the decorations being loaded into the church that morning and put 2 and 2 together. Tyler sent one text. I'm sorry. I hope you understand. She didn't respond. What was there to say? That she didn't understand? That sorry wasn't enough? That he'd destroyed her in a way she wasn't sure she'd recover from? Instead, she deleted his number and blocked him on every platform. But through it all, Malcolm texted, not constantly, not intrusively, just there. How are you today? Saw a dog that looked like it had opinions. Made me think of your vet work. Autumn wants to know if you're feeling better. She drew you a picture. Can I send it? Each message was a lifeline, a small reminder that someone out there saw her as more than the tragic wedding story. On the 5th day after the wedding that wasn't, Tessa found herself actually looking forward to Malcolm's texts. They'd started talking more, not about Tyler or the wedding, but about everything else: books, movies, the challenges of single parenthood, the frustrations of physical therapy, the small joys that still existed even in dark times. Malcolm told her about Autumn's latest school project, about how she'd insisted on making a get-well-soon card for someone she just met but already cared about. Tessa told him about her therapy sessions, about the anger she felt, about how some days she wanted to scream and other days she just wanted to disappear. And Malcolm never tried to fix it, never offered empty platitudes or toxic positivity. He just listened. And somehow, that was exactly what she needed. 2 weeks after the garden, Malcolm sent a message that was different from the others. Autumn has a school event on Friday, nothing fancy, just a little art show where the kids display their projects. She's been working on a painting, and she's really proud of it. She asked if you'd want to come. No pressure at all, but I wanted to pass along the invitation. Tessa stared at the message for a long time. Going out, being around people, facing the world after everything that had happened, it terrified her. But something about the invitation, the casualness of it, the fact that it wasn't a grand gesture, made her want to say yes. What time? She typed. 6 p.m. at the elementary school. Fair warning, there will be juice boxes and very enthusiastic children. Tessa smiled, the first real smile she'd managed since the garden. I think I can handle that. Friday evening arrived too quickly. Tessa spent an hour agonizing over what to wear, which was ridiculous because it was an elementary school art show, not a gala. But nothing felt right. Everything felt too formal or too casual, or too much like trying too hard. Finally, she settled on jeans and a comfortable sweater, simple, unpretentious, real. The school was buzzing with activity when she arrived. Parents milled around the hallway, admiring crayon drawings and clay sculptures displayed on tables. Children ran past, high on sugar and excitement. And there, near the back wall, was Malcolm. He spotted her immediately and smiled, warm, genuine, relieved that she'd actually come. You made it, he said, walking over. I almost didn't, Tessa admitted. But Autumn invited me, and I don't break promises to 6-year-olds. Smart policy. Autumn appeared a moment later, her face lighting up like a firework. Tessa, you came! She threw her arms around Tessa without hesitation, and Tessa hugged her back, feeling something warm and healing in the embrace. I wouldn't miss it, Tessa said. I heard you made a painting. Come see, come see. Autumn grabbed Tessa's hand and pulled her toward a small easel. The painting was abstract, swirls of color with bright sunbursts, and what might have been flowers or possibly birds. In the corner, in careful child handwriting, was the title, When Bad Days End. It's beautiful, Tessa said softly. Tell me about it. Well, Autumn began seriously. The dark colors are the bad stuff, like when people are sad or scared or something hurts. But see the yellow and orange? That's when the bad day is ending, and good things start happening, because Daddy always says bad days end. They always do. Tessa felt her throat tighten. Your daddy is very smart. I know, Autumn said proudly. For the next hour, Tessa found herself swept up in the simple joy of the evening. Autumn introduced her to friends. Malcolm stayed close but not hovering, giving her space to breathe while making sure she never felt alone. When a few parents gave Tessa curious looks, noticing the wheelchair, maybe wondering who she was, Malcolm didn't draw attention to it, didn't make a big deal, just treated her like anyone else, which was, Tessa realized, all she'd ever wanted. As the evening wound down and families started leaving, Malcolm walked Tessa to her car. Thank you for coming, he said. Autumn hasn't stopped talking about you since that day at the church. She's an amazing kid, Tessa said. You're doing something very right. I'm doing my best. Malcolm said. That's all any of us can do. Tessa looked at him in the fading light of the parking lot. This man who'd appeared at the worst moment of her life and had quietly, consistently shown up ever since. Can I ask you something? She said suddenly. Anything. Why? Why did you stop that day? Why did you stay? Why are you still here, texting me and inviting me to art shows and being kind to someone you barely know? Malcolm was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because 4 years ago, when my wife left, I felt completely alone, like I was drowning and everyone else was on the shore watching but not helping. And I promised myself that if I ever saw someone drowning, I wouldn't just watch. I'd reach out, even if I was a stranger, even if it was awkward or inconvenient, because someone should have done that for me. And I can't go back and fix my past, but I can show up for someone else's present. Tessa felt tears gathering, but they weren't sad tears. They were something else, something softer. You saved me that day, she whispered. You don't think you did, but you did. You saved yourself, Malcolm said gently. I just reminded you that you could. Over the following weeks, something shifted. What had started as kindness evolved into friendship. Malcolm and Tessa began meeting for coffee, just casual conversations where they talked about everything and nothing. Autumn often joined them, coloring at the table while the adults talked. Tessa shared more about her life before the accident, her love for animals, her dreams of opening her own clinic someday, her fears that those dreams were over now. Malcolm listened and asked questions and never once suggested that her wheelchair made those dreams impossible. Adaptations, he said simply when she expressed doubt. Not limitations. You find new ways to do the things you love. One afternoon, Tessa invited Malcolm and Autumn to visit the adaptive animal therapy program where she'd started volunteering part-time. It was her first step back into the world she loved, and she was nervous about how it would go. Malcolm and Autumn showed up with a homemade sign that read, "We're proud of you, Tessa." She cried when she saw it, happy tears this time. Watching Malcolm interact with the therapy dogs, seeing how gentle he was with the animals and how patiently he helped Autumn learn proper handling techniques, Tessa felt something stir in her chest, something she thought was dead after Tyler. Attraction, interest, the flutter of possibility. But she pushed it down. It was too soon, too complicated. Malcolm was her friend, and she couldn't risk losing that by wanting more. 3 months after the garden, Autumn had a seizure. It happened late at night. Malcolm called Tessa at 2 o'clock in the morning, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "I'm sorry to call so late," he said. "Autumn had a bad one. We're at the hospital. She's stable now, but I needed to hear a friendly voice." "I'm on my way," Tessa said immediately. "You don't have to." "I'm on my way," she repeated firmly. She arrived at the hospital 40 minutes later, navigating the sterile hallways until she found Malcolm in the waiting area. He looked exhausted, his hair disheveled, his eyes shadowed with the kind of fear that never fully left a parent in moments like these. Tessa wheeled herself over and took his hand. "She's okay," Malcolm said, more to convince himself than her. "The doctors say she's stable, but it was bad, Tessa. Really bad. For a few minutes I thought—" He didn't finish the sentence. "But she's okay," Tessa said firmly. "She's here. You're here. That's what matters." They sat together in the waiting room until the doctors allowed Malcolm back to see Autumn. Tessa stayed, refusing to leave, even when Malcolm assured her she could go home. "You were there for me on my worst day. I'm here for yours." When dawn broke and Autumn was finally released with instructions to rest and follow up with her neurologist, Malcolm drove Tessa home. They sat in his car outside her apartment building, both of them too tired to move. "Thank you," Malcolm said quietly. "For showing up, for staying. That's what friends do," Tessa said. But as she said it, she realized with startling clarity that friend wasn't the right word anymore. Somewhere between the garden and the art show and the hospital waiting room, something had shifted. She was falling for him. She was falling for Malcolm Foster, this kind, patient, steadfast man who'd seen her at her lowest and hadn't turned away, who'd introduced her to his daughter without hesitation, who'd made space in his life for someone else's pain without expecting anything in return. And that terrified her, because what if she wasn't enough? What if, like Tyler, Malcolm eventually decided that being with someone in a wheelchair was too complicated, too difficult, too much? What if she opened her heart again, and it got destroyed a second time? Days turned into weeks, and the dynamic between Tessa and Malcolm continued to evolve. They talked every day. They saw each other multiple times a week. Autumn had started calling Tessa her bonus friend, and the three of them fell into an easy rhythm that felt almost like family. But Tessa kept her feelings locked away, safe, protected behind walls that Tyler's abandonment had built, until one Saturday afternoon changed everything. Malcolm had invited Tessa to join them for a day at the park. It was late autumn now, 6 months since the garden, and the leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold. They'd packed a picnic, and Autumn was running around collecting acorns while Malcolm and Tessa sat on a bench together. "Can I ask you something personal?" Malcolm said suddenly. Tessa felt her stomach flip. "Okay. That day at the church," he began carefully. "When I met you, you were at the absolute lowest point. And look at you now. You're volunteering. You're smiling. You're living. How did you do it?" Tessa thought about the question, really thought about it. "Honestly?" she said. "You." Malcolm looked surprised. "Me? You showed me that I was worth showing up for," Tessa said. "Tyler taught me that I was a burden, that loving me required too much sacrifice. But you just showed up. No drama, no grand gestures. You just kept being there. And gradually, I started to believe that maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. "Tessa," he said finally, "can I tell you something that might be wildly inappropriate?" Her heart started racing. "Yes. I didn't stop in that garden just to be kind," he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I mean, I did, but it became something more. Over these past months, getting to know you, seeing who you are when you're not in crisis, I've realized something." "What?" she whispered. "I'm falling in love with you." The world seemed to tilt. "And I know that might be too much, too soon," Malcolm continued quickly. "I know you're still healing from what Tyler did. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is complicated, but I needed you to know because I don't want to be your friend anymore, Tessa. I want to be more. And I need to know if that's even a possibility or if I should." Tessa kissed him. She'd never been a particularly bold person, but in that moment, she didn't care about fear or consequences or the possibility of getting hurt again. She leaned forward and kissed Malcolm Foster with everything she had. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing hard, Tessa laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised even her. "Yes," she said. "Yes, it's a possibility. Yes, I'm falling for you, too. Yes to all of it." Malcolm's smile could have lit up the entire park. Autumn chose that exact moment to run back over, waving a particularly large acorn. "Look what I found! It's huge!" And she stopped, noticing the way Malcolm and Tessa were looking at each other. "Why are you both smiling so big?" "Because," Malcolm said, pulling his daughter into a hug while keeping one hand intertwined with Tessa's. "Today is a very good day." "Finally!" Autumn exclaimed. "I've been waiting forever for you two to kiss." Both adults laughed, and Tessa felt something she hadn't felt in almost a year, complete. The months that followed were not perfect. Tessa still had bad days, days when the trauma of the wedding that wasn't haunted her, days when she struggled with her disability, and the ways her life had changed, days when doubt crept in and whispered that maybe she wasn't enough. But Malcolm was there, always. He adapted his car to make it easier for Tessa to transfer from her wheelchair, not because she asked, but because he paid attention and wanted to make her life easier. He learned about spinal cord injuries and accessibility, and how to support her without infantilizing her. He introduced her to his family as his girlfriend with pride, not hesitation. And when Tessa's PT appointments were particularly brutal, He showed up with takeout and terrible movies and the understanding that sometimes love looked like just sitting together in comfortable silence. Tessa, in turn, was there for Malcolm. When work stress mounted, she listened. When Autumn's seizures frightened him, she reminded him of his strength. When he doubted his abilities as a single parent, she showed him all the ways he was succeeding. They built a life together, not quickly, not perfectly, but authentically. 1 year after the garden, Malcolm took Tessa back to Riverside Community Church. She'd been nervous about returning. The place still held painful memories: the wedding dress, the tears, the humiliation. But Malcolm had asked her to trust him, and she did. They arrived in the late afternoon, the same spring sunlight filtering through the trees as it had that devastating May day. Malcolm wheeled Tessa toward the side garden, and her breath caught. It was filled with white roses, dozens of them. "Malcolm, what?" He knelt beside her wheelchair, at her level, and took both her hands in his. "Tessa, a year ago, I found you in this garden on what should have been the worst day of your life. And I've watched you transform that pain into strength. I've watched you reclaim your dreams, rebuild your confidence, and show me what real courage looks like." Tears were already streaming down her face. "You've shown Autumn what resilience means. You've shown me what it feels like to be truly seen and accepted. And you've proven that the right person doesn't see obstacles, they see opportunities to love better." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "The first wedding dress you wore was meant for the wrong person. And I'm not trying to erase that day or pretend it didn't happen, but I want to give you a new memory, a better one where someone kneels beside you and asks, not because they're settling, not because they're being noble, but because they genuinely cannot imagine their life without you." He opened the box, revealing a simple, beautiful ring. "Tessa, will you marry me?" At that moment, Autumn appeared from behind a tree, holding a sign that read, "Will you be my bonus mom?" Tessa sobbed, full body, shaking sobs of pure, overwhelming joy. "Yes," she gasped. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Malcolm slipped the ring onto her finger, and Autumn rushed forward, throwing her arms around both of them in a group hug that felt like coming home. "We love you, Tessa," Malcolm whispered in her hair. "Just as you are, always." 3 months later, they were married at Riverside Community Church in a small, intimate ceremony. Tessa wore a simple white dress, nothing like the elaborate gown from a year ago. She wheeled herself down the aisle, no one walking beside her, no one to give her away, because she was giving herself freely, fully, without reservation. Malcolm waited at the altar, Autumn beside him in a yellow dress, holding a small bouquet. When Tessa reached them, Malcolm knelt beside her wheelchair, and they held hands as the officiant spoke about commitment, about showing up, about the extraordinary power of ordinary love. "Do you, Malcolm, take Tessa to be your wife, to stand by her in sickness and health, in joy and challenge, for all the days of your life?" "I do," Malcolm said firmly. "Absolutely, without question." "And do you, Tessa, take Malcolm to be your husband?" Tessa looked at this man who'd found her broken and stayed until she was whole, who'd seen past the wheelchair to the person she was, who'd loved her not despite her challenges, but including them. "I do," she said, her voice strong and clear. When they kissed, the small gathering erupted in applause. Autumn cheered the loudest. As they left the church that afternoon, Malcolm pushing Tessa's wheelchair while she held Autumn's hand, Tessa looked back at the garden one more time. A year ago, she'd sat in that spot, believing her life was over, believing she was unlovable, believing that the wheelchair had stolen her chance at happiness. But she'd been wrong. The wheelchair hadn't stolen anything. It had revealed everything. It had shown her who truly loved her and who didn't. It had filtered out the people who loved conditionally and introduced her to someone who loved unconditionally. Tyler had left because he saw her wheelchair as a barrier to the life he wanted. Malcolm had stayed because he saw Tessa as the life he wanted. And that made all the difference. If this story reminded you that your worthiness of love is never defined by circumstances or challenges, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button if you believe real love shows up, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary beauty of choosing each other exactly as we are. Because sometimes, the worst day of your life is actually the doorway to the best chapter. Sometimes, rejection from the wrong person makes space for acceptance from the right one. And sometimes, a stranger in a garden becomes the love you never saw coming. This is Tessa and Malcolm's story, a reminder that real love doesn't walk away when life gets hard. Real love sits down in the grass and stays.